Hey everyone, welcome back to another driving review video here on the channel. Today you join me in the 2025 Mazda CX-50 Hybrid, which is a joint collaboration between Mazda and Toyota. Now, as usual, I want to go ahead and start this video off with my acceleration test, and we'll put it in the power mode, which is unique to the hybrid, and full throttle. And we are up to speed. So, overall performance, not a super strong suit of the CX-50, but certainly better than that of the base 2.5 liter naturally aspirated four-cylinder. Anyways, under the hood, you're going to find a Toyota powertrain borrowed from that of the Rav4, which is the fourth generation hybrid setup. So it's a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated Atkinson cycle four-cylinder with 3 electric motors, 2 for the front end, 1 for the rear end, so there's no mechanical connection from the front axle to the rear axle, and overall output is 216 horsepower and 163 pound-feet of torque. Now, as I mentioned, performance and, straight line speed really isn't going to be the strong suit of this powertrain, although on paper it slots, pretty good between the standard 2.5 liter Skyactiv engine and that, of course, of the 2.5 liter turbo, which is substantially more powerful and more performance oriented within the CX-50's lineup. But before we get into talking about how this vehicle drives, I do want to talk more about where this kind of slots within the lineup, as well as some of those packaging differences. So essentially, this is the collaboration between Mazda and Toyota, where they got that 4th generation hybrid powertrain, had to do some modifications to the subframe, some of the mounting locations within the body itself. This vehicle actually has a higher it is lifted versus that of the standard CX-50, but doesn't necessarily net you any ground clearance given some of the componentry on the underside of the vehicle, and this is very cleverly hidden on the exterior with some of the plastics and trim pieces by Mazda, so it retains really most of the styling from the standard cars, but does of course get unique suspension tuning, unique componentry, mounting locations, subframes, things like that to make the Toyota parts fit in within the Mazda platform. Now, it slots really nicely, not only in terms of price point, but also powertrain between the standard four-cylinder and that of the 2.5 liter turbo. But as I've learned and looked into this a little bit further, the hybrid suffers the same packaging differences from the turbo as that of the naturally aspirated engine from Mazda. So even though this is a fully loaded Premium Plus vehicle, you are going to be missing a lot of the nicer amenities, creature comforts, and enhancements of the turbo model within this vehicle, such as no heated steering wheel, no heated second row seats, no 360 camera system, and the list really does go on. There's going to be several substantial differences between the turbo and these other two powertrain offerings in the Premium Plus model specifically. So do keep that in mind if you're looking at a hybrid versus a turbo and things like that, as there are going to be some key differences. Now, starting out with how the vehicle drives, this is actually the second CX-50 I've actually had the opportunity to spend a week-long test with. Last year I had the CX-50 Meridian Edition, which of course is the off-road oriented trim level. Does get the 2.5 liter turbo powertrain, although for the 2023 model year, which the vehicle I had, it had substantially less equipment because Mazda has had some packaging revisions for 2025 to make all of the turbo models extremely well equipped, from that of the Meridian all the way up to the Premium Plus. Now, taking a look at visibility inside this vehicle, it has a unique seating position inside the CX-50 in that you feel like you sit more towards the front of the vehicle, and the side mirrors are actually very close in proximity to your overall seating position and seating location. So visibility really isn't all that bad inside this vehicle. You can see over the hood without any issue. You have a direct line of sight with the door-mounted side mirrors here on either side of the vehicle with blind spot detection, of course. And then taking a look out the rear, you have the normal headrest situation above the second row seats, but the glass space is pretty sizable out of the hatch area. And then looking over your shoulder, that's actually a very good over the shoulder viewpoint, given they have that extra piece of glass on the C-pillar, and the shape of this vehicle tends to be, pretty good in terms of outward visibility from the front seats. Although I will say, and as I noted in my last CX-50 videos, you do see the side haunches of this vehicle with the styling and the body lines out of the side mirrors themselves. So really not a big issue as long as you adjust your mirrors and everything accordingly, but that is something you actually can see when looking down the side vehicle out of the side of the vehicle itself. Now, do have an ambulance coming, so we're going to go ahead and pull over safely here. But in terms of some of the suspension tweaks for not only the hybrid, but also for the 2025 model year, they did actually revise the spring rates, the damper setups, and the tuning of this vehicle, I believe, to soften it up just a little bit, at least in certain configurations over that of the last several model years. Now, with the tuning of the hybrid, it is still going to be very similar to that of the turbo in terms of its ride quality and the kind of the firmness that you get with the tuning the way Mazda has set up this vehicle. So we are about to go over my bumpy section of road, but essentially it's a very well controlled ride quality. It certainly gives you a more dynamic, sportier feel than that of some of the other compact SUVs within the segment, whether it be gas or hybrid. So I certainly like that about Mazda, but it is going to be, like I said, slightly firmer than that of other offerings, such as the Rav4, the Honda CR-V, maybe even vehicles like that of the Hyundai Tucson and the Kia Sportage. But it's still well controlled, well damped, and I don't think a lot of people out there would necessarily find it harsh by any means, rather than just a little bit firmer than those other offerings. So here we are about to head over this section of roadway, and immediately hitting some of these bumps, you can feel the suspension, the way they've tuned every CX-50 essentially. And this vehicle does ride on 19-inch alloy wheels, which is 1 inch smaller than that of the gasoline counterparts, likely for a little bit of efficiency advantage and maybe something to do with styling and whatnot. But it is firm. It's not bad by any means. It's well controlled, and I like the handling benefits that you do get out of the way they've tuned the suspension. But to some people, it might be a little bit on the firm side. Now, transitioning here onto the interior, some of the feature set and the overall styling and things like that, I really like this about the CX-50 across the lineup. Coming back to this vehicle after having that other CX-50, like I said, last year, it makes me realize how much I appreciate a lot about how Mazda just does things and how they've set up their interiors. Because yes, it is a little bit more on the traditional side of things, from the fact that you have a gauge cluster with a hood and a dashboard around it. You have the infotainment separated over here away from the driver with your multimedia controller in the center console, and then you have your HVAC, heated seats, ventilated seats, all down in a lower area, which is just more of a traditional design, if you will, kind of sectioning or partitioning off these different attributes about the interior. But when you look at the interior in this fully loaded model, materials are very, very nice. And I know this one has the black and brown interior, which isn't too exciting, but materials are very soft. You have a mix of leather and, injection molded plastics and things like that throughout the inside. The center console is going to be hard plastic, which is my one kind of nitpick. And the center console, or I guess the driver's seat or the front seat space, is a little bit more on the narrow side of things, so I find my knee resting on the center console quite often. But the interior just feels properly set up in comparison to some other recent vehicles I've been behind the wheel of. Now, ultimately, that's going to come down to personal preference and kind of what you value on vehicles. If you like the larger screens, this doesn't have the largest in the class by far. 10.25-inch infotainment system with the 7-inch fully digital, partially configurable gauge cluster. But I like it. I think it's, well set up. I like the multimedia infotainment controller for the wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. The infotainment system, or the Mazda UI, really isn't all that grand by any means, but it's pretty straightforward once you get used to it and using the controller. It's not a touch screen, but turns into a touch screen for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. And I like the shortcut buttons. I like the volume knob here in the center console, the traditional physical shifter. The cup holders in front of the shifter is kind of a little bit of an oddity there, but it's really not a big deal for your average size beverages. And then you have the wireless charging pad set here just before the split folding center console, which does open up on both sides like that. So I think if you're looking at a CX-50 and comparing it to some of those other competitors, now I haven't driven or been inside all of the competition, but I do know Mazda has a somewhat unique way of laying out their interiors, and I like it. I think it is, you know, a step up from that of the mainstream class, if you will. And I know Mazda tries to do that inside of a lot of their offerings, and I think they did a fantastic job across the CX-50. So the hybrid version of this vehicle, luckily, does not change really anything about a lot of the positive aspects about this vehicle. Now, I will say the one thing I do want to mention about the interior specifically is going to be the seat comfort. Now, this one being a Premium Plus has the heated and ventilated first row seats in the genuine leather material. This one, the black and brown, as I mentioned. And the seat comfort is something that I not only mentioned in my last CX-50, but continues to be something I have to mention in this 2025 model here. It's just very firm, and it borders on uncomfortable. Now, this is by far not the seat comfort that I would want for a multi-hour road trip, but it's not an issue for around town city drivings on these 30, 45-minute situations. So would it prevent me from buying a CX-50? It's possible. I have to admit, it's possible. They are firm. Some people out there suggest that they might break in over time. Maybe, maybe not. This vehicle has 3,200 miles that I'm driving right now. But I think over time, it's just something that would start to bother me. And now that I've had experience behind the wheel of a lot of these other manufacturers, had they thrown Toyota front seats inside this vehicle, I'm just saying it would probably be even more of a positive experience, because a lot of what Toyota and specifically Lexus has to offer are extremely comfortable seats. So at the end of the day, they're going to be firm seats, kind of like that of the firm suspension tuning of this vehicle. So it all kind of starts to tie together, and then you have the firmer steering feel as well. So it kind of has a trend, if you will, of the Mazda design and, you know, things like that. But turning out here on the interstate, giving it full throttle acceleration, performance isn't bad, but you do hear that 4th generation hybrid really working, quite buzzy. And then what's interesting and that I noticed of the tuning of this vehicle is, even though this is an eCVT type transmission, if you give it a certain amount of throttle input and then go full throttle, it almost acts like it's trying to downshift. And I don't recall that actually happening in a lot of Toyota vehicles. So here we are cruising at just under 70 miles an hour. I put my foot down. It acts like it's trying to shift. So it's just something that maybe they've tuned the vehicle to have a little bit of extra character over that of the standard, you know, Toyota hybrid setups, if you will. But taking a look at the driver assistance and the technology behind this vehicle, it has the same equipment as that of the standard naturally aspirated 4-cylinder car. So it has adaptive radar cruise control. It has the lane keeping, emergency lane keeping assist, but it doesn't have the full safety suite for the traffic cruising and things like that that the turbo models will gain. And that's just all part of that packaging that Mazda has decided to equip the hybrid and the standard gas engine that the turbo models get over those. So I think the driver assistance as a whole is pretty darn good. It's not the best class leading system out there by any means, but it's not the worst. Radar cruise control has you know, a lot of different distance settings, and it actually works quite well. It's just that I wish it had more of a traditional lane centering assist functionality for longer distance driving, and was just a little bit more advanced in comparison to some of the more recent competitors and things like that. So driver assistance, not the strong suit by Mazda, but not the worst by any means from what I have experienced. Road noise out of the interstate at 70 plus miles an hour, not bad either. You will hear some road noise, some wind noise starting to enter the cabin in a decent amount, but the Bose 12-speaker surround sound premium audio system does a good job of drowning that out and handling inside this vehicle. There is going to be a slight change of center of gravity as well as weight. This is a little bit heavier, of course, with the high voltage battery system beneath the rear seat. Does change handling characteristics a little bit, but it's actually still, you know, very Mazda feeling behind the wheel. The only thing I will mention is in regards to the power steering and the way it is calibrated and tuned, is that on center or off center feels a little bit number than that of I recall in the Meridian edition that I had. So it still points and goes in the direction that you're going. It's mainly when you're trying to return the wheel to center, you notice just a little bit of like wandering. It's not even bad, it's just kind of vagueness, if you will. So it might not be as direct as that of some of the other you know, standard CX-50s or other Mazdas, but really not bad, and I think I still actually like it and prefer it over that of some of the other competition. In terms of fuel economy, what I've been averaging over the last about 6 days with this vehicle, well, unfortunately, I'll be fully transparent. I only have just over 100 miles currently on this CX-50 Hybrid, and it says 25.1 mpg. Now that's due to the extreme below normal cold conditions that have actually plagued this week with the vehicle. So it's been doing a decent amount of idling, and that has certainly shown to impact the fuel economy, which I did reset upon receiving the vehicle. So this vehicle is rated at about 38 combined, 37 highway, 39 in the city. And I would fully expect under normal winter conditions, assuming maybe you have it parked in a garage, to see maybe low 30 mpg range, and then towards summer and warmer times of year I would think you would meet the EPA figures of the mid to upper 30 mpg range, depending on the type of driving that you do. Typically, Toyota hybrids do get a little bit better in the city than that of out on the highway, and that's kind of a traditional hybrid thing in general. So I would say mid to upper 30s under ideal conditions, average temperatures, things like that should be expected inside this vehicle. But wintertime, of course, will take a toll on any vehicle, no matter if you're driving electric or gas or hybrid. And as you can see, we're a good chunk under 30, but I think that would improve if I were to do a little bit more driving. Now, speaking of this hybrid powertrain in the wintertime, I was very impressed with how quickly it was able to warm the cabin up versus that of some other vehicles I have experienced. Now, I recently had a Toyota Prius Prime. That vehicle in similar ambient exterior conditions was very slow to heat the cabin, to the point of that might be a deal breaker for me on that vehicle, because it just took, you know, well over 15 minutes to really get warm air inside the cabin, where this Mazda, it starts up immediately upon, you know, going out. I started this vehicle in like 5-degree conditions one morning, started up without an issue, and I let it run for nearly exactly 10 minutes. Came out to it. Yes, the dial on the coolant level or temperature here was not near operating temperature, but it was just on the border of the blue section. So that means it was already starting to warm the engine up, and I could feel warm air, much warmer than that of outside, pumping into the cabin. So I thought they actually do a great job with climate control, HVAC, and getting the engine warm, so the occupants inside the cabin will not feel ultimately uncomfortable in these, you know, freezing winter temperatures. So that was a highlight of this vehicle also, and that might just be a benefit or how Toyota has tuned the Rav4 to act similarly, but Mazda for sure inside this vehicle did a great job with the warm-up time of the powertrain. You can see now that we are fully warm on this drive, it's now using a little bit more of the high voltage battery and the electric motors to not only shut the engine off during cruising, but also just to power the vehicle forward, where it will prioritize mainly the gas engine at first to, like I said, for climate control and, you know, other reasons to charge the battery, things like that. Ultimately, what my thoughts are of the CX-50 Hybrid are very positive, and kind of what I expected going into this week, where I filmed a walk-around video on the very first day I had this vehicle, and this is towards the end of the week. And I don't think I'm disappointed whatsoever in this collaboration. I think it benefited Mazda more than it probably benefits Toyota, in that now Mazda has a competitive hybrid powertrain in one of their best-selling compact SUVs. And the CX-50 already was, you know, very high regards on my list of this segment and vehicles I've driven. And I think it maintains that position due to now having 3 different engine choices available in this vehicle. And I think the refinement, the smoothness, the benefits coming from the 4th generation hybrid from Toyota, do really suit the CX-50 quite well, and just the competition in general, because yes, this hybrid system set up a little bit differently than that of some other competitors on the market in this segment, but they were able to not only keep pricing and the packaging in check to be, still very competitive versus the segment, but it's just, I think, the styling, the characteristics, the feel that you get from Mazda vehicles, and the CX-50 specifically, just have a little bit more character than that of some of the other offerings. Now, I've never driven or lived with a new RAV4, so I can't speak in that regard. But in vehicles versus like the Hyundai Tucson, for example, great setup, more powerful than this hybrid powertrain. So if you value performance, that might be something to consider. Very similar efficiency in terms of fuel economy, but I think the interior layout, the materials exude just a little bit more of a premium feel in the CX-50, although you are missing certain features and options that vehicle will have, such as the heated steering wheel, the 360 camera system, parking sensors, etc. So there is going to be a slight trade-off, but the interesting aspect is this vehicle, as equipped, comes in under $42,000, even with the extra cost white paint color, where now the Tucson fully loaded limited hybrid will exceed the $42,000 price point, including destination. So this vehicle is about $1,000 less than that one. So I think price point, I think they did a pretty darn good job placing this vehicle in the Mazda CX-50 lineup and just the compact SUV space in general. So I think that is kind of where I'm going to leave my overall impressions and opinion of this vehicle. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and or found something helpful as always. If you did, make sure to hit that like button below, subscribe if you haven't already. Huge thanks to Mazda for sending the CX-50 out for me to test and review over the last week. This was a vehicle I requested several months ago when I first learned about the collaboration and the fact they're coming out with a hybrid. I was like, oh, I am extremely interested about this vehicle. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get it before the embargo date, so you probably have seen a bunch of other content prior to me, but hopefully you guys still found my opinion helpful and useful in your search for this vehicle. And let me know what you guys think of it down in the comment section below. Do you guys like the collaboration with Mazda and Toyota? Do you like the packaging? I know I've seen comments out there that wish they packaged this vehicle similar to that of the turbo model, and I totally agree with you on that. It might be due to the fact of where it is actually built. This vehicle is a US assembled vehicle down in the Mazda Toyota joint venture facility in Georgia, where they actually assemble, I believe, the Crown Signia alongside the CX-50 Hybrid. So it could be due to that, but overall I just wish it had a few more key options and features borrowed from that of the turbo models, and I think it would be an extremely big winner. But even as it sits, I love the way it drives. I think it's very smooth. Mazda's interior and styling are above average, certainly, and there's still enough equipment here to make this a very livable, enjoyable daily driver. So, like I said, leave your thoughts and opinions on this vehicle down in the comment section below. As always, I appreciate continued support and hope to see you guys in the next one.